Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hi, friends. Great to have you join us again today. Oh, my goodness. You know what I liked about the 1950s? I probably didn't even realize it at the time, but it was just a time of safety and friends and love of your parents. And it was just a nice, cohesive time. And so, Jackie, I think we have another guest today who could tell us about that time.
I know you for sure we do. But before we get there, everyone look at the bottom of that purple banner. You see that little message going across the bottom. It says www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. And here we'd invite you to go to see all of the vendors who sell our book, to learn about the authors, to learn about where the authors might be appearing, and all of the 1950s fun chats. Now, I mentioned the book, and the book is in the upper corner of your screen. It is called While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. And it is this little book that spurred us to having this 1950s fun chat. You'll also see in the corner down there a little white dot, which indicates that the book won an Independent Press Award in the regional category as a distinguished favorite, and this was in 2022. Now, on with our guest, please. Janice Ratcliff's father wanted to make a farmer out of her. Well, did he succeed? We'll find out. Janice was born on March 23rd, 1950 in southwest Iowa in Cass County. Her family lived on a farm near Lyman, Iowa, a very small town that included a country store, a church, a welder, a country school, and a few homes. Besides her parents, Janice's family consisted of a sister who is 2 years younger and a dog named Ginger. Mm-hmm. After 8 years of small town life, the family moved to her grandpa's farm about 15 miles away. The big change for this primary school girl was that she started riding a bus to the town school, which happened to be Atlantic, Iowa. She graduated from Atlantic High School in 1968 and enrolled in Simpson College to become a teacher. She really wanted to be a high school social studies teacher, but in her first year of college, she was told that a girl could not have that degree, as she would not be qualified as a coach. This is puzzling to me, but we'll learn about that, I guess. So she changed her degree to elementary. Janice met Randy while they were attending college, and they were married December of 1972. Both of them taught in Wisconsin for 5 years before moving back to Iowa. Now, during her 34 years of education, Janice has taught all grades 1 through 8. Randy and Janice were blessed with 2 sons, Brian and Ben. Brian lives in Centennial, Colorado with his wife and 2 sons, Max, a freshman at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and Luke, a 13-year-old. Now, Ben and his wife, Tiffany, and their 2 toddlers, 4-year-old Theo and 2-year-old Matilda, live in Corte Madera, California. Now, Randy and Janice are currently in Aurora, Colorado, and sometimes they're in Arizona. So they live mostly in Colorado, so they can be close to their grandsons. So, Janice, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
So the first question that popped up to me when I was reading this bio, yes, it's out of order, but when I was reading it, the question that came to me was, how did you feel about being told that you could not major in social studies because that would not qualify you as a coach? Yes. Does that admonishment even make sense?
No, it didn't. At first, when you get called in by the education department and they're sitting behind a table, thinking, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. What happened? And then they said, well, you can't. No one will hire you, even if you have a degree. No one will hire you because they hire social studies teachers to be coaches. And at that time in Iowa, women could not get coaching endorsements. So, and it was just like that. They said, so what else do you want to be?
Mhm.
They said,
Oh,
how about
I hadn't thought
elementary?
about that.
About elementary? I said, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it just like that, it changed. My family, I talked to my daughter-in-laws about it, and they're just appalled that
I feel the same way.
that was something that happened at that time, but it did. It
Mhm.
did. And within, if I had been a year or two older or younger, either way,
Yeah.
but younger, then the rules changed. But they didn't change
Mhm.
until I was a senior in college. Well, by that time, I was
Mhm.
well on my way to being an elementary teacher.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
yes, so
Yep.
yes, that is always a question, and we have come a long way, girls.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. We have, and we're more to go in some cases.
Yeah,
So then,
yeah.
well, let's go skip back to your childhood then. Before the 50s, maybe that had some influence, and in the 50s influence. And so tell us about your family and your school and your dance classes, and you've got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think my story actually begins, like you say, with my parents, because they were both people that were in the World War II. My mother, much to the chagrin of her parents, they were quite appalled that she would go off and join the Navy. Girls didn't do that weren't that bold at that
No.
time either. And so she did. She joined the Navy and was stationed in South Bend, Indiana, and in Corpus Christi, Texas. And she did clerical work for the Navy. That was another appalling thing to everybody. How could somebody that comes from the Midwest be interested in being in the Navy, of all things?
Mhm.
But anyway, she did, and she loved to travel. And the best part for her was she met lifelong friends that she still communicated right up until she died. So
Mhm.
they had a lot of bonding time during that time. And I remember as a child, we traveled to visit all those people all over the United States. My dad grew up on a farm near Cumberland, Iowa, which isn't very far from Lyman or Atlantic or that whole Southwest Iowa thing. He was one of 4 children in his family, the third son. And in good old German tradition, the oldest son always got the farm. The rest of the children had to kind of fare for yourselves as to what you were going to do with your life. And so during that time, the other thing he always complained about was because he was the third son, he got the worst chores
Oh,
for
yes.
everybody to do. And the chore that they gave him was to watch the livestock out in the field as they grazed during the day. They would bring him in the evening, but they would go back out during the day, and somebody had to watch them. So he spent hours and hours out in fields watching animals that really were not going anywhere.
Mhm.
They weren't running off or doing any of that, but they had to be there. So he had seen somebody twirling ropes, and he thought he'd really like to learn about that. So he saved his pennies and he sent away. I always wondered whether it was Montgomery Ward or something like that, where he got a little book on how to twirl ropes.
Mhm.
And he spent hours out there in the field practicing he had lots of time to practice, and he really honed in on his skills, not only using the ropes to catch a calf just
Mhm.
for fun, or a fence post just for fun, but also just to learn to do multiple rope twirling. And so move ahead, he graduated from country school. And this is where, well, what are you going to do? And his parents sent him to Grand Island, Nebraska, because they had a business school and they thought it would be a really good thing for him to go to business school. And it was okay. He's always, Janine can tell you that he was a businessman, but he learned how to type and he learned how to take shorthand. during that time. So, again, women aren't in this picture, men were doing those jobs. And before he finished, he was drafted into the war. So he had to come home. And I don't know whether through the process of filling paperwork out, but somehow or other, the colonel that was in charge of the group that he was assigned to saw that he could twirl ropes. So he contacted my dad and said, I want you to bring your ropes with you when we go overseas. They can go in the back of my car. The colonel always could drive somewhere, not walk necessarily. So it was a blessing for my dad because he kind of avoided military confrontation because his group were doctors, nurses, people who took care of the wounded. And I really think from what he told me, it was a lot like MASH. And he was Klinger or radar, the guys that made the phone calls, the guys that typed, the guys that made sure that they had this or that or the other thing. That's what my dad did. And he got to ride in the colonel's car. So, all of that because he could twirl ropes. And they used it as entertainment over there. When things weren't going bad, then they would have a little night where had nothing going on. So he would get up and do a show of twirling ropes, and it was a hit. But when you think about the old cowboys that are famous, they all could twirl ropes and they could do all of that. So even John Wayne, I think, could do some of that stuff. So it was a blessing for him. He went into Germany on D-Day. He was the day after D-Day because he was medical. And so most of the guys had already, gone in on Omaha Beach. Well, that's where they arrived, but they were treating the wounded and all of that sort of thing. So it was very cool. I got to go to Omaha Beach and where D-Day is, and it's just fascinating. And it gave me goosebumps to know that my dad walked in on that shore and saw that wall of rock and all of that sort of thing. So, he still foxholes. He talked about foxholes a lot and wet and muddy. And it was Christmas Eve and the bombers were going over his head and how frightened he was. So he had those experiences, but he was pretty lucky that he didn't have to actually, do as much as the guys that, anyways.
Janice, did he ever teach other soldiers how to twirl ropes?
I think he did. They never really had enough time to really, hone their skills. Now, I've never heard. Now, my mom and dad they had reunions with his group. They were called the Timberwolves. And they went for 25 years all over the United States to conventions of guys that were there, and he'd meet up with some of the guys he knew, and again, lifelong friends with these people. He did teach my sister and I how to do this, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll take that part and move it around. But he taught both of us when we were like maybe 3 and 5, we both could twirl a rope, and my mom made little cowgirl outfits for us. And he would entertain at fairs, county fairs, rodeos. There were lots of rodeos that went on in Southwest Iowa. Griswold had one. All these different little towns had rodeos. So we were like the halftime entertainment. I don't think there's really a halftime in rodeos, but they would stop. And we would get up on the stage and Dad would do his ropes, but he could twirl a rope over his head, do one with this hand and one in his mouth. So he would do 3 ropes at a time, and then he could jump through them, and my sister and I would run through them and so forth. So it was quite a show.
I bet. Janice, When your dad would get a new rope, did it take a while to break it in? Did he
Oh,
your
yes. Oh,
rope
yes.
that were
You
rub-
had to really, you always had a really tightly woven rope with fine strands, not thick strands, because that was just too heavy. You had a smaller, but it was, but he had ropes that were probably 30 feet long because they would go around. I mean, they
Oh,
were big ones. And then he would have his other hand doing another one. There was a rope trick where you would go back and forth like this with the rope, and it was called a butterfly. And I could do the butterfly. Elizabeth never really mastered that, but she was 2 years younger, and coordination plays a role in that. So,
how
and
long in your childhood did you continue to do this?
oh, we would play out in the yard with our ropes and twirl and do that like other kids would play with a jump rope. I mean, we did that as well. But, he really revised the interest. And when we'd get together with family reunions or family get togethers, he always took his ropes and we would do a little show. Then we got to be teenagers, and then we thought that was,
Did he ever teach your children?
He did. He did. Both of my boys know how to twirl, and they got when my dad passed away, all the grandkids got a portion of his ropes because all the grandkids knew how to twirl ropes. Not to the point where he knew how to do, but it takes practice and time, and none of them really had the time to do that. But it was a treasure that they all asked for when Dad passed away. And we had a whole actually there is a canister that you buy that keeps the ropes in it, and boy, they went through that canister and took the ropes that they really, really wanted to have. And I just say one end of that story, kind of, on my dad's 90th birthday, he said, I'm going to twirl ropes. And so he was at his care facility, and we invited people in and all of that. And he went out in the parking lot and he was able to twirl one rope. And, there's a certain amount of balance that goes along with twirling a rope. But he was so pleased that on his 90th birthday, he could still do that. And
Janice,
go ahead. Did he ride a horse?
Janice, do you have a video of him doing this?
Yes. I did not know I had a video until my aunt's kids, my cousins, found in my aunt's things. My parents were funny. My mother had one sister, and so one sister got a camera that was really nice just to take snapshots, and the other sister got the movie camera. And then they would each trade off. And so they couldn't afford to have both, but they each would have one of those. And in the pile of things, we found ropes or found movies of my sister and I and my dad.
Oh, cool. Treasure.
Oh, it is a treasure. Yes. I cried when I saw it because I thought that was only going to always be in my mind and not something that you could see.
Have you upgraded that to be on a thumb drive?
It's not on a thumb drive yet. And it's in Colorado, and I'm not there, or I might be able to get that to you.
Oh, okay.
But I need to put it on a thumb drive so it can get on their computers.
Yes.
So,
did your dad ever ride horseback?
Oh, yes. And that comes to, I'll just say one more thing about the ropes. When my boys were in first grade, they were the big cheese or the important person for a week at my school. I was teaching there, and they were in my school. And so Grandpa came and did a show for the whole elementary in the gym. Oh, my kids were stars. The kids, I mean, who knew in this day and age? But it was something that nobody else's grandpa, daddy knew how to do. And so it was a big thing. So when the first one was in first grade, and then when Ben was in first grade, they both got a show of grandpa's
Yeah.
twirling of ropes. So it really expanded his lifetime.
Oh, I guess.
Totally.
So can you remember the biggest event that he twirled, where he twirled, at the rodeo or a festival?
Well, I remember distinctly a rodeo in Griswold, and that's close to where Janine used to live.
Yeah.
And then there's a very popular rodeo in Sydney, Nebraska, the
Oh, okay.
Sydney Rodeo. I mean, it's a big one. Anyway, he did that one time.
Okay.
So that's probably the farthest away that I remember. But at that time in the 50s, people's worlds were about this big. They did it.
Right.
We thought that was a long way to go. So,
Yes.
Okay.
so getting back to your question, Janine, yes. I'll move into the next part of my life as a little girl on the farm. My dad, not knowing this until just recently, when you came back from the war, they had a bank account for every soldier in World War II. And you didn't get paid every month or every week while you were in the war. They all got paid, but they didn't get it right then. And they just put it in a bank account. So when he came home after 2.5 years, that bank account was a nice little pot of money. And so he bought a farm. He didn't get the farm. He bought into a farm. He had to pay it off and all of that, but he started his farming in this near Lyman, Iowa. And we always had a horse as long as I can remember being at home or any of the farms. And the horse was always named Lucky.
Yeah.
So when a horse would die or get sick or whatever, the next horse we would get would be Lucky. So we have had many Luckies in our life, and he actually started farming with horses, and he ended farming with computers. And you think of that transition, and he rode his horses a lot. And so at the beginning of their farm, he did it with horses. And I can remember as a little girl, he got his first tractor, and it was a red Farmall H tractor. And he thought that he had bought a limousine. I mean, it was just like the best thing ever. And we would have rides on it. But it really improved what he could do with farming.
Sure.
Then he really made a big jump. But yes, we always had a horse.
I always think of your dad as being a very compassionate man. And when he quit farming with horses, did he keep that team around very long?
No, he kept the riding horse, but not the team. No, he kept some of the harnesses, and he kept some of the equipment that you used when you used horses. But no, he never kept the horses. He just kept a riding horse.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyway, and growing up on the farm, I feel like I was the luckiest person around. It wasn't a very big farm, but I was, we just lived this little isolated life out in the country working. My mom had a giant garden, and of course, everything we ate for the whole year, like I'm sure with you two, was grown on our farm. Either the meat or the vegetables or the fruit. We had fruit trees, we had all kinds. And so that involved lots of canning, lots of work to get all summer long to do. And Elizabeth and I, from a little age, we could pick beans or we could pick strawberries, and we could help. We were always expected to help. But
did you have a milk cow?
No. That's a thank you for bringing that up, because the bad jobs my dad hated as a child, out in the field and milking the cow. And he hated that cow. And he said at that time, I'll never have a cow on my property. And my mother grew up with a cow, and she thought that was awful when we were little, that we had to buy milk. But he insisted there was never a cow on our property because he hated that job.
Well, couldn't blame him.
I agree. I'm sure he got kicked a few times. And some things
Yes.
like that, but we
So,
never had a
Go,
cow.
move on to your dance classes, please.
Oh, yes. Well, I went to country school down the road.
Mhm.
There were K-8. And so I started in kindergarten, and it was a wonderful experience. You know, everybody played together. If you were a
Mhm.
14-year-old or you were a 5-year-old, everybody was included in the ball games or the kickball or whatever it was. And the big kids took care of the little kids. One thing I remember as a kindergartner, there was an 8th grader sitting behind me, and he kept pulling my hair all the time. And I just didn't like that. And my mother said, don't you do anything. You just leave it alone. He will get tired of doing it, and that'll be the end of it. So anyway, yes. So, but it was, I would say it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I would say there was some bad parts in it. I learned to read with a McGuffrey reader. I don't know whether you're familiar with those, but it's a reading method where you just memorize what the words look like. You don't, I knew there were letters of the alphabet. I knew those, but I didn't know that some were consonants and some were vowels, and that vowels made sounds and consonants made sounds. They'd show me a word like there. Now look at the shape of it and memorize that. And it was a terrible way as a teacher of reading to kids, terrible way of learning to read. So then when I went to town school, oh my goodness, I was about 10 miles behind everybody else because I didn't have all that background that you need to learn to read. So that was a detriment. But then there were great things about being there. And I remember in kindergarten, I had to get up and say a poem with my dad. He just stood there, but Walking with My Dad was the name of the poem.
Oh,
I don't remember it anymore, but Walking with My Dad. And I remember there was a part in it that said, he has such big steps and I have such little steps to try to keep up with him. But you know, we had those programs, we had all of that. That was wonderful. Just across from the school was the county store, or the country store. And interesting, that was a place where you could go and barter what you had on the farm with what you needed. And so my mom raised chickens, and she would take her eggs, you know, and Elizabeth and I got to help wash the eggs and put them in the containers and give them to, and then we would take them over every week to the county store or the country store. And then with the money from that, my mom got sugar and flour and salt, some of the things that you can't raise on the farm. And so it was a great, you know, give and take.
right. Right.
Great give and take.
At that particular time, did flour come in sacks,
Yes.
paper sacks, or were they fabric
No,
sacks?
they were smaller. I think you could get big sacks, but they were smaller, maybe like 10, 15 pounds or something like that. But they were in paper, I think.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Did your mom ever sew clothes for you and Elizabeth?
Oh, always. That's all I had
Okay. How about
was
from feed sack?
yeah, I had play clothes that were made out of sacks and things like that. But and I had a grandma, that my mother's mother, who you know, was retired, lived in town, and every once in a while she would bring a store-bought dress to us. You know, of course, that was Sunday school material. You know, that was what you know, you didn't wear that to play in, but the others you would use that to play in. So another fond memory I have at that time is my mother's sister just lived with the cameras, her husband was raised or had eggs and raised chickens, baby chickens that he sold for laying, or not laying, but for butchering.
Okay.
And so lots of people would buy, I mean, he would do thousands and thousands of baby chicks, and they all came about Easter time. So he would take the eggs and insert green dye, blue dye, pink dye. And so Elizabeth and I would get little baby chickens that were pink and red and green. and
Yes.
all that. And I have very fond memories of getting to play with those. And in those videos of my dad twirling ropes, here are Elizabeth and I playing with these little colored chickens.
How fun. I
How
kind of remember those because I always thought they were so cool versus just a plain old yellow chick.
we were special because we got different colors. And of course, as soon as they lost their baby feathers, they were just like a regular chicken. So it didn't hurt the chicken. But he always did that for us. And we always got to play out in the yard. So not so much Easter bunnies, but more baby chicks were what we got to do. And then my mom, we would do 100. She'd get 100 of those. And then in one day we would butcher all of them. We would cut them up, do all of that. Elizabeth and I had to pluck all the feathers off. We got the worst job because
and I had to do that too. I think that was
we were the little ones. But anyway, it was great. We had chicken all winter, and we had, everything we could want. And
I'm assuming you had deep freezers? Deep freezers?
We did not. We did. No, we did. I take that back. We did, but it wasn't very big. There was enough for meat and the chickens. And so most everything we did out of the garden was canned.
Okay, sure.
Although we did can some beef as well.
Yes, it was good, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, I like it.
Oh, we would take, whenever we did that, it was always the end of the season. So you had apples and you had that kind of thing. And so we made mincemeat, which is a German thing. It was the funniest thing. We would do it at my aunt's house. And again, an assembly line thing, everybody helping to do it. But my sister and I would have to go into my aunt's bedroom and shut the door because they'd put a secret ingredient.
Did you ever find out what that was?
I'm sure it was either whiskey or bourbon.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but because, and then you bake it. Well, that pretty much takes that out of it, but it was for the flavor, and it was the German way of doing it. And so Elizabeth and I would sit there like, what could they be putting in that we can't see?
Did you ever detect a taste of alcohol in the?
No, I like it. I like mincemeat pie, but still, yeah. Anyway, it was a big influence of German in my family. Both sides, all 4 grandparents were born in Germany and came over on the boat through Ellis Island. And so big influence. They spoke German in the home, but when they left the home, then they would speak English. So there was a big influence of that German heritage.
So you were able to pick up some of the language?
I picked up some, more ufta or.
No, that's Norwegian.
That's Norwegian. Auf Wiedersehen. Yeah. But not a lot, because I'm now 2 generations past that, and everybody spoke English. So
what about those dance lessons?
Oh, the dance lessons. I'm sorry, we keep getting distracted. My mom thought it was really important. Now, we didn't have much money, but we had enough money that we would drive to Atlantic, which was 15 miles, 20 miles every week, to have dance lessons. And then my mom and Janine's mother-in-law and some of the other mothers would make our costumes. And my favorite one was, we were Little Miss Bo Peep, and they did it out of satiny material. We had a staff, we had this dance, and then we did a military one where we had little outfits that were white corduroy with all the braid and the bands. I mean, our mothers worked really hard on making those. My mom, there was somehow they found money in the budget that we could go to dance lessons. She thought that was really, really important for us. So, yeah. So
how many years?
Anyway,
how many years did you take?
I think
how many years did you take?
3 or 4. And then we moved to my grandpa's farm, which was a much larger farm, when I was in third grade. And that's probably about the time that we stopped. And then 4-H became the big thing in our lives when we moved to that farm. And the influence of 4-H was, I can't even, it keeps coming back to me through even now of all the things that I learned. That's where I learned how to sew. I mean, my mother would have taught me anyway, but I really learned a lot of the ins and outs of sewing. I learned how to, the skill of canning more than what I knew with just helping my mom. Baking, we did home furnishings, where you stripped down a piece of furniture and stained it, or you made pillows, or you did all those kinds of skills were wonderful. But I think the most wonderful part was now I had a whole new set of friends. The neighborhood friends. And it was a reason, because I lived on a line where on my side of the road, we went to Atlantic to school. On the other side of the road, they all went to Griswold, another town. And so we weren't all in the same school, so not knowing each other very well. But 4-H kind of brought that all together, and longtime friends through what happened with 4-H. And don't leave my dad out. He was determined that we were going to do something on the farm. So we got yearlings, and in the fall and started, and that was a job, that wasn't their job. It was our job to make sure they were fed every day, twice a day, make sure their stall was cleaned, and make sure you did, and then start training them for the fair. The big deal forever was the county fair. It was a big, as with a lot of places, but we took our calves to the fair and showed them. And Elizabeth even got stepped on by hers and broke her foot in the middle of the fair, but so still showed that calf with her cast on. Anyway, and I'm the proudest I am is that I made a dress, a wool dress that had buttonholes and zippers and whatnot lined. And I won a blue ribbon at the state fair and a blue at the county fair and at the state fair.
Oh, wonderful.
Well,
that's
congratulations.
Well, it was a big deal to get something at the state fair. And, it is still hanging in my closet. and it has moved from Iowa to Wisconsin, back to Iowa, to Colorado, to Arizona, back to Colorado. It's moved a lot. My husband looks at it every time and says, really, we're taking that to the next one? Yes, that's a blue ribbon dress. Now,
I can relate to that.
I can get into it any longer, but it's there.
Yes. Did you give any demonstrations?
Oh, yes.
Oh, can you remember?
I remember I did a demonstration on muffins.
Oh, I did too.
I think that was kind of standard. Everybody did muffins. And I did a demonstration on, I think it was pillows, actually. I could be wrong, but anyway, those skills, and then the record book. I hated that record book. And my mother would stand with a thing to get them done because they were due. And I just hated doing all of that detailed pictures and whatnot. But you know what? It taught me so much about organizing my thoughts and organizing my life and this picture of what I had been doing for a whole year was there in that record book over multiple years. And again, a lifelong skill that I still use,
You still have your record books then too?
I do. Again, that's another one. Why are we taking these across Nebraska when it's by weight when you move them? And I said, because they're my life. They're a picture of your life at that time.
That's right.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah. I do have a memory of my growing up with Christmas in the fact that it was very family oriented. This was everybody's, but you always got together and traditional. every got together, you had the same foods and all of that sort of thing. But the thing I remember, and I still do today, is from a little girl, we would get in the car, Grandpa's car, and we would drive around town and look at the lights on
Yes.
Christmas night. And I just thought everything was like a magic land. You know, many people didn't put lights out, but many people did. And I still like to do that. And last Christmas, Randy and I went around town looking at lights. And my grandkids like to do it now because we did it with them. I don't know. That's a fun tradition in our family.
Were you involved in it when the aluminum trees and the
yes.
strobes came
Yes,
along?
my grandma had an aluminum tree that had a thing that made it pink, and then it was blue. And I always thought it was the most ugly thing. What happened to our green tree? But it was the popular thing at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Yes.
special.
Yeah.
Well, Janice, as we're wrapping up our conversation, there's probably so much more that we could talk about. What memory from the 1950s do you feel has been the most influential in your life as an adult?
Oh boy. I would say family, the importance of family, and how they play a role in every aspect of your life. It isn't like it used to be because we all don't live within 20 miles of each other any longer. We're all across the country, and I have trouble with my own family. You know, I have one that's in California and all of that, and trying to get everybody under the same roof is a very difficult thing to do. And it used to be, well, it was just given. You always would do that, you know, but it's my family and my parents did a wonderful job of putting that into my life, every aspect of it, all the way along.
Neat. You are a blessed gal because of that too.
I am.
And as are your children and your grandchildren.
Absolutely. And my children, they think my dad is the best thing that's ever happened to them. And both of them spoke at his funeral, and they both, you know, they always, and that was my goal. We lived in Wisconsin, loved it, but moved back to Iowa so my kids would know their grandparents. And so, and so it worked, their grandparents, and they still talk about grandpa. So that's a big deal, deal.
Yes. Janice Ratclif, we thank you so much for being our guest today. This has been a wonderful journey.
Well, it was a wonderful journey for me, pulling all of these memories up. So thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Jackie, can you close out our show today?
Well, I want to say one thing. I think we've heard that Janice's dad failed in making his daughter a farmer.
We didn't get into that, did we?
No.
He tried. He tried.
Okay.
Yeah, well, he did. He had me driving a tractor and emptying from a combine into the wagon and driving it in. And I'm 5'2", maybe. And to reach the pedals and do all of that, it was very difficult. But boy, he wanted it bad.
Well, anyway, you turned out pretty well anyway. Yes. What an adventure your life has been.
Yes. And I'm still involved with that farm. So I still work. I mean, I'm still involved with it even today, even though I'm not the farmer. I'm the business end of it. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
Viewers, we thank you for joining us, and thank you, our guest. It's been a real treat to walk down your memory lane.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So viewers, do tell your friends and even your family about the 1950s Fun Chat. So until next time, toodaloo.